Joining us now is Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer. Josh, it is great to see you again. So the Trump administration invites European leaders to Washington, D.C. They were all there to show their support to bring a war to an end. Many of them were thanking Donald Trump. You know, we heard from Finland's leader pointing out that in 2 weeks, Donald Trump made more progress in bringing the Russia-Ukraine war to an end than we've seen in the past 3.5 years. But that's not the story, according to Abby Phillip and, you know, parts of the other leftist media. What did you make of what Abby Phillip had to say?
Look, at this point, Donald Trump could literally breathe. He could get up there, Gabrielle. He could literally get up there at the White House press podium and say, "I support you breathing." And Abby Phillips and half the left-wing media would literally suffocate themselves on the spot. Because, I mean, it is literally whatever Donald Trump says, whatever he does, they immediately, instinctually do the exact opposite. But, you know, it was actually Mark Rutte, the general secretary of NATO. Trump's actually been quite critical of NATO going all the way back to his first term. Well, Rutte actually said that Donald Trump was amazing at this meeting on Monday there. I mean, you had folks like Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is a left-wing guy. Emmanuel Macron, no one's idea of a conservative there. I mean, sure, Giorgia Meloni was there. Trump's golfing buddy, the head of Finland, was there. But there were a lot of liberals actually at this meeting. And to a T down the line, you really saw no one offering anything other than praise to Donald Trump, because he orchestrated here a tremendous diplomatic demonstration. You know, the media just last week was flipping out that, oh my God, Donald Trump is meeting with the war criminal himself, Vladimir Putin. Oh my God, is he going to capitulate to this 21st century Hitler? And then he turns around and literally on the next business day, he pulls off one of the greatest demonstrations of White House diplomacy, probably in the entire history of the country. I mean, when is the last time that many national leaders have all been there under one roof, in this case, the White House? I mean, it hasn't happened, certainly in my lifetime. I would think over 100 years, actually, if I remember the stat correctly. So very, very, very impressive stuff. But as I said, literally anything he does, no matter what whatsoever, you know, the Abby Phillips gang, Rachel Maddow, that whole crew, they're going to criticize him no matter what.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. What we saw at the White House earlier this week, that was absolutely extraordinary. But we have heard from Democrat Stephen A. Smith. He's blasted the BS that we keep hearing from the Democrats as Donald Trump tries to get a peace deal. And he didn't hold back, as he really stated the obvious and gave some obvious truths, giving the Democrats a reality check that Donald Trump has done more than any administration to end world conflicts, and a reminder that this war started under Joe Biden's watch.
We ain't going to act like he caused this now. It's Democrats in office. It was Biden in office when a full-fledged war against Ukraine took place, courtesy of Russia's instigation, no matter what they try to say to Trump. It was Russia that invaded Crimea, and that was under the Obama administration. It was Clinton in office when you made a deal that disarmed the Ukraine and therefore weakened them, leaving them dependent on the United States. And now, here they are, having to beg for support that they're owed because of what we promised them as a nation. We promised them this. You owe it to the Ukrainians. You absolutely do. I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying I like spending billions of our taxpayer dollars to them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is promises made are supposed to be promises kept.
Now, finally, Josh Hammer, look, what did you make of what he had to say? It was refreshing to hear someone on the left actually give credit where credit's due.
You know, Gabriella, it's funny. I'm a longtime sports fan, and back in the day, Stephen A. Smith would rant like that about like LeBron James or Tiger Woods or something on ESPN. So this whole kind of Stephen A. Smith delivering these political hot takes is kind of a whirlwind to me. Kind of makes me wonder what exactly he's gearing up for, frankly. I mean, is the political run himself? He's a very charismatic figure, certainly. I guess we shall see. He also actually has some interesting bipartisan cross appeal. So he is ostensibly a Democrat. I believe he's still a registered Democrat, but he's a very moderate Democrat, as we heard in that rant just there. He's maintained some across the aisle friendships with people like Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, and others there. Look, that was a pretty clear-eyed rant as far as I'm concerned there. I think it's no accident. As Donald Trump has been fond of noting, Gabrielle, and he's totally right to note this, Vladimir Putin has a habit of invading Ukraine when one party is in charge, when the Democrats are in charge. He swooped into Crimea in 2014 during the second Barack Obama term. He swooped in 2022 during the first, and praise be to God, the only Joe Biden term there. So, if Donald Trump was in power, as he likes to say, this obviously would not have happened there. But Donald Trump also, Gabrielle, let's not forget that for a very, very long time, essentially since his very first days in the Oval Office in 2017, the left and the media, but I repeat myself, they have excoriated, they have decried Donald Trump as some sort of warmonger, as someone who is trying to impose totalitarian hegemony all across the world there. He's trying to do XYZ things, World War III, blah, 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 blah. This is the greatest peacemaking, deal-making president of my lifetime, arguably, frankly, in American history. I mean, look at all these peace deals he's orchestrating. My goodness gracious. India and Pakistan, Thailand and Cambodia, Armenia and Azerbaijan. I was in Armenia 2 years ago. I saw that conflict up front and personal. It is a bitter, bitter, bitter conflict. The Israel-Iran ceasefire after the 12-day war, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I mean, I could go on here, but this is extraordinary diplomatic prowess. I mean, everyone from Trump to Marco Rubio as Secretary of State and on down the line there, just doing an absolutely phenomenal job, which is why if you are an intellectually honest Democrat, which Stephen A. Smith is, you really just have to kind of tip your hat at that point and say, job well done. I mean, let's see what happens with Russia, Ukraine. That's the big elephant in the room. Let's see what happens there. But on the other hand, if you're not an intellectually honest Democrat, if you're just a total left-wing hack like an Abby Phillips, well, we all saw that.
Well, let's talk about Marco Rubio. He's revoked more than 6,000 student visas for overstays and crimes, and that includes support for terrorism. Around 200 to 300 people have engaged in behaviour such as raising funds for Hamas. Now, Josh, there's still a long way to go in terms of stamping out anti-Semitism, but this administration is really not mucking around.
So there's multiple things going on here with these student visas being yanked. On the one hand, it's black letter immigration law here in the United States there, and liberals would challenge what I'm going to say, but what I'm going to say has been the immigration law for over 200 years here in America, which is that if you are not a citizen, your status can be revoked at any time for any reason, period, full stop, end of story. There was a very, very long line of U.S. Supreme Court cases holding exactly that there. So the notion that we actually need a reason in order to yank your visa, especially if it's a shorter term visa, like a student visa, if you're not here in a green card, the notion that we need any kind of specific reason is actually contrary to black letter immigration law. But as the case may be, a lot of these folks, probably all of them actually, they have very good reasons to have their visas yanked there because they are an active support of United States State Department recognized foreign terrorist organizations, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and on down the line there. There is zero reason, literally zero, not one, two, one, literally zero reason, period, full stop, end of story, why any single person who is not a U.S. citizen who supports a U.S. recognized foreign terrorist organization should be here on American soil. I would actually, Gabriella, frankly, go even further than that. And I would say that even if you are a U.S. citizen who is engaged in active support there, if you are trying to raise funds for foreign terrorist organizations, if you are an active support there, I would actually go so far as to say that we should strongly consider going down the path of actually denaturalizing citizenship for naturalized citizens. That's a whole nother conversation there. The final thing that I'll just briefly add there, because we are talking here about student visas, I think part of kind of this nationalist, populist, MAGA, America First approach to higher education in general is coming around to the idea that America should not be involved in the game of educating the future leaders of our leading adversaries. I think back to when I was in university at Duke University in North Carolina, a shockingly high percentage of my classmates were Chinese nationals. I actually took Chinese language for 3 semesters there, and pretty much all my classmates were Chinese nationals. Why exactly were we doing that? Why exactly were U.S. taxpayer dollars going to funding the future leaders of America's literal #1 geopolitical foe? It frankly makes no sense whatsoever. So whether it's that or whether it's active support of groups like Hamas there, I think Rubio is absolutely unequivocally doing the right thing here.
Absolutely. Josh, I want to talk to you about LA because in January we saw LA battle through one of the most destructive fires in California's history. And the disaster, of course, was made worse because of the incompetence of its leaders. We had Mayor Karen Bass and California Governor Gavin Newsom. We know that 12 people lost their lives. Thousands and thousands of homes were destroyed. Where was Karen Bass? Well, she was enjoying herself at a cocktail party in Ghana. She ignored the National Weather Service warnings of extreme fire weather conditions on January 3. She flew to Ghana on a junket the next day, and by January 7, LA was going up in flames. And of course, when she returned, we all remember her bravery and her message to Angelenos.
We owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning. Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
Can you back up, please? Appreciate it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position?
Nothing. She said absolutely nothing. She just ran away from the cameras, just showing what a weak leader she really is. And it was quickly revealed that Karen Bass cut the fire department's budget by almost $18 million ahead of those wildfires. The reservoirs were sitting empty, firefighters were running out of water, and the fire chief at the time, Kristen Crowley, admitted on live television that Karen Bass failed her and failed LA.
And I tell you, that's why I'm here. So let's get us what we need so our firefighters can do their jobs.
Did they fail you?
Yes.
Well, Karen Bass then fired Kristen Crowley, but the ex-fire chief is now taking legal action against Karen Bass, claiming that she was the scapegoat for the city's response to the wildfires. Now, part of her statement says, as the fire chief for nearly 3 years, I advocated for proper funding, staffing and infrastructure upgrades to better support and protect our firefighters and, by extension, our communities. The lies, deceit, exaggerations and misrepresentations need to be addressed with the only thing that can refute them, the true facts. Now, the legal claim also says that Karen Bass made multiple false claims justifying the removal of Kristen Crowley as chief, including suggestions that Crowley sent 1,000 firefighters home. Josh, how is this going to play out? I know there's a lot of anger still in Los Angeles directed at Karen Bass over the fires.
Well, Gabriella, I know that all too personally, actually. So I live in Florida, not in California, but my wife and I have friends actually who lost their home. In fact, we actually were at a wedding in Santa Barbara, California, just in May for like a couple who got married that weekend. They literally lost their home just 4.5 months prior to their wedding day in the Palisades fire there. And there are all too many stories like this. It was just a horrific thing. But that Karen Bass video, by the way, where she just refuses to answer the questions there.
Yeah,
I remember watching that like it was yesterday, actually. I mean, absolutely astonishing stuff. I mean, it's so awkward. I mean, literally just like standing there, just, I mean, you can shake your head, you can walk away there, you can kind of like put your hand up to the camera, but I mean, like, don't just like stand there. I mean, that is political malpractice 101. Now, Crowley, the ex-fire chief, is interesting because at the time, a lot of the conservative media here in the United States was talking about how Crowley was actually the first avowedly, I believe, homosexual, lesbian fire chief of any major city in the United States. There are a lot of folks in conservative media were talking about how this was a DEI hire, and that kind of led to the fire there. Now we're starting to learn a slightly different version of former fire chief Crowley there. I will be very curious to see where this particular lawsuit goes. What I do know is that Karen Bass is worse than nothing, that she is horrific. I mean, she was a backbencher Democrat in the U.S. Congress. She was in the House and she was an absolute nobody when it comes to legislation, a total backbencher there. Then she goes into the mayor's office, and we've now literally seen L.A. go to probably the lowest point in its entire fairly illustrious actually history as a city there. So look, we'll see what happens there, but it's a very interesting turn from Ms. Crowley, who kind of went from the punching bag of conservative media here to now being something of a hero there. I'll be very curious to see that, as Gabriella, where this lawsuit goes.
I completely agree with you about your assessment of Karen Bass. You know, what she's done even since then. She's been against ICE. While there have been riots in Los Angeles a few months ago, she was insisting they weren't violent, and we just saw so much violence being played out. She's such a joke. And frustratingly, rather, for residents in LA, Karen Bass is delaying the after-action report on the Palisades fire, and she's delaying it until the ongoing federal investigation into the cause has been completed. But people in the community are just so sick of this, sick of the delay, and need answers about the city's response. It's been 7 months now, and they're still waiting.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason to do this other than just pure obfuscation, right? I mean, she can kind of claim this procedural reason over waiting for the feds to release XYZ thing before we release our local finding there. That is a total red herring. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever why the municipality of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, cannot release their findings prior to the Trump PAM bomb the DOJ. That frankly makes no sense whatsoever. But by the way, Gabriella, I think it's probably an appropriate time to remind the audience here, you know, this is actually not the only fire in recent years here in America that we are still awaiting some sense of an explanation here. I mean, it was the Maui, Hawaii fire roughly 2 years ago in the year 2023, where, if I'm not mistaken, that was by some estimates, because we actually still don't know how many people died in the Maui fire. Some people estimate that was actually the single deadliest fire in American history, at least since the Great Chicago Fire of the late 19th century. So this is not the first time that we've seen something like this there. I suspect what's actually happening here, Gabriella, is frankly Occam's razor. The most simplest explanation is usually the right explanation, which is that these are politicians who are literally just trying to cover their behind by any means necessary there. I'm very happy that the Trump Pam Bondi DOJ is on the case, but again, there's absolutely no reason why the city and county of Los Angeles should be trying to appeal to the feds in order to evade responsibility. That frankly is nothing less than a glaring middle finger to the voters of Los Angeles County there. And the voters of Los Angeles County had any sense in them whatsoever there, they would vote these bums out of office ASAP.
Absolutely. Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks as always, Gabrielle.